Hello, everyone. This is Sean Daeley with Global Voice Acting Academy. I am so excited because I have a chance to welcome and introduce to you, our viewers, our newest coach on our coaching roster, the incredible, the lovely, and talented Carol Monda. How are you doing, Carol?
I'm very, very well, lovely and talented, Sean. True.
Thank you so much. So for those of you who have been living under a rock and might not know Carol, she is an incredibly talented and successful voice talent in working in all different genres in commercial and narration and audiobooks. Some of her prestigious clients include McDonald's, the Discovery Channel, and Turner Classic Movies. And I believe she has something like 400 audiobook titles to your name. That's insane.
It is insane. And of course, there are those who have, 1,000, but I do feel somewhat surprised myself when I really think about it and count them up.
It is quite the accomplishment. How exactly did you get involved from acting into doing audiobook work?
It really is a normal crossover or an understandable crossover because it is very much, at least with fiction, an acting exercise. You get to play all the parts, you get to be your own director, and you don't have to wear the makeup and the costumes and project, to a large house. It's a very intimate experience, which is especially why I really love the class that we're going to be doing. But anyway, I digress. I mostly started just having about 3 or 4 weeks between shows, and things just escalated from there.
That's amazing. And 400 books later, and here we are.
I know. And
so you did mention a class, and this is a perfect time to segue into that. So Carol is actually going to be teaching a live webinar with us on January 23rd. At 5 p.m. Pacific time and 8 p.m. Eastern. And that one is going to be called Subtext, the story beneath the words. I love that. So, so some actors, I know I had some theatrical training and I'm also a literature major. So I'm familiar with subtext, but some people might not be, or at least not in the context of acting and voice acting. So could you tell us a little bit about what subtext is and what it means to you?
Sure. Oh, bless your heart. Now, sometimes it really is genuine, but a lot of the time it's come to be known as the key phrase or the go-to phrase of when someone is really saying something and meaning something else. So the subtext is what are you really saying when you're using those words, and what is the attitude underneath it? And sometimes people disguise those true feelings better than others. But for example, if you feel the urge to tell the truth about something, and for whatever reason you're concerned about someone's judgment of you, you're concerned you'll just feel bad yourself if you are truthful, those kinds of opportunities arise fairly often, I think, and that's kind of a fundamental way of understanding that we always have something going on underneath what we're saying, pretty much. A lot of times my subtext is, for example, right now, I'm so excited about this class and I'm so excited about this topic. But, there are certainly times when, even in Shakespeare, there's a line about, oh, you're so beautiful and you're ripe as a daisy, but what it really is meaning from a character who's very lecherous is that, oh, I'm going to get you alone and, do bad things. It can be as dangerous and high risk as that our audience is told, this is a nefarious fellow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it sounds like you can just get so much more meat out of a performance if you have a little bit more understanding of the subtext. Because I know in my own in my own self-directing and stuff like that, I'm always trying to figure out ways to have a more nuanced performance or a more layered performance. And being able to, I mean, the author already put it in the book.
Yeah.
You just have to understand what their intent is and figure out how to honor that intent and deliver it accordingly.
Yes, yes, and I think too. I love what you just said about the layers, because that's exactly what we're talking about. The many levels of communication, from simply the brain making a statement of some kind of hopefully logical meaning, all the way to your very gut, your very visceral reactions to things. And of course, almost more than not, it's the heart, right? What we're feeling. And that's really the heart of the entire class, is what are you saying and what are you feeling? It doesn't have to be juxtaposed and opposite, as I was describing earlier, like, oh, bless your heart, when really it's just, oh, you're just a horrible person. Um, you know, it can be, bless your heart. And what my underscore is, has much more to do with, I am so impressed by you, and I admire you, and I think this is an impressive thing you're doing, for example. So it is just one more layer of the onion called our communication life. The life that happens during any kind of expression that is clearly not just words.
Wonderful. So what other kind of techniques or topics were we going to cover during this webinar?
Well, I think mainly I was hoping to jump right into the idea of what are you feeling and what are you analyzing that is going on underneath the text. So it's mainly a class made for people who have been doing this for a little bit of time, and maybe even have a few books under their belt with ACX or other publishers, so that there's a common kind of ground that we're starting with. And then I really want to kind of tease out ideas that we all deal with in terms of marking up the text, and also making mental notes, both about character, but also about moments, And we don't have to physically write notes, although I always I recommend doing character bios, but that sort of thing is going to be the start, just the idea of how do you read? How do you first absorb the text? And I suggest that it should be just sort of with a tabula rasa, just an uncarved block, a clean slate, and don't make too many choices, And so we'll do some exercises just about how to read without a lot of opinion or initial rushing to judgment. And then we'll talk about, once you do the close read, I'll call it the deeper read, where you are starting to make some acting choices. How can you get the fuller sort of broad meaning out from the page to, instead of the stage, the mic,
So you hinted at a little bit at your process, but I'm just curious because it's quite the undertaking, and many audiobook narrators are like a one-man band, one-stop shop of director, yes, talent, and producer. So what I'm curious about, because you kind of have, we were talking a little bit about the author's intent, but a lot of it is open to your interpretation. So how do you find the confidence to make those strong, confident choices?
That's such a great question. There should be a class just on that. Really, really. And I would love to explore that. I think that mainly it's, in a sense, likened to when you go see a piece of art. And you don't really know what the artist intended. What I mean by a piece of art, because I know that can mean anything from dance to, finger painting. But I'm describing the idea of looking at a painting, for example. And, I'm sure we've all had this experience where you go and you see, the great pain, and the other person sees, something very silly and frivolous, and maybe even decides that the author was trying to make fun of some aspect of this painting. It's hard without, showing an exact kind of idea of this. But the point being that many people interpret the same piece of art in different ways. And so I think the confidence comes from being able to substantiate and justify what your interpretation is, and to know that there's always going to be a level of gray area that I think if you feel like you know exactly what's going on, you're probably doing a disservice to the author and the audience, because that's really, to me, the trick, not just of subtext, but of characterization, is making a very specific amount of choices for yourself, making specific choices for yourself, but also knowing that you don't want to pin down the audience and lead them only to one place. You want to read in such a way that it still gives air and space to the listener,
Wonderful. So do you feel like these techniques of trying to identify and honor the subtext, do you feel like some genres lend themselves to it more than others? I know
Yeah.
some of our listeners were actually curious if like children's literature, if this would be a relevant skill for that.
Yes, that's a great question, because a lot of times, I've heard many times that, children just tell it like it is. They only want to hear what the truth is, and they're more intolerant of subtext in a way. They can see, what are you really saying, Mom, about that I can't have that cookie?
No ambiguity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But even with children's books, for example, oftentimes you'll have a witch, and the witch will be very endearing to the, character, or to the, even to the creatures in the forest, let's say. But ultimately, you find out that she's poisoning every one of them, or putting a spell on someone. And so that's one example of how you can you can hear the words of the witch sort of inviting and casting this, in a way, kind of invitational spell, where you're really spellbound. And then she's got you right in the place where you're vulnerable, and she can take advantage. And eventually that sweet smile will turn into a happy, evil cackle, and somewhere along the line, she's going to be saying things that for us, the audience, are clearer and clearer as having double meaning, or having deeper meaning, or having contrasting meaning,
Yeah, and it really helps you hit that foreshadowing. Like there might be moments of humor that you might not miss if you're not paying close attention. You might
Mm-hmm.
flub a line that way. So yeah,
Yeah.
already like my brain's percolating. I'm like, yes, this is great. This is wonderful.
Yeah, and then there are in the adult kind of genres, I would say that oftentimes murder mysteries and suspense genres have an awful lot of that, because a lot of times, it's a tricky kind of thing. The writing itself, in that sense, can be almost subtextual, just by virtue of not wanting to give away the whodunit kind of thing,
Exactly.
And so that's another kind of thing that's brought up. There are different kinds of subtext, in a way, that are sometimes a little more surface, and sometimes there's a lot of subterfuge, and you can hardly recognize that anything is going on untowardly I know that's not a word, but but that there is that sense of okay, so this could be true and that could be true, but what's really true? And only I think really through subtext are you, kind of is there a provocative that big kind of how is this going to unfold and unveil itself? Same with romance, actually. I mean, it's oftentimes a little more obvious that when those two characters that you just know are going to get together are fighting, that even the words they use sometimes can belie what they're feeling, because they don't want to show that they actually, even though I just was insulted by you, I really like you, that sort of stuff.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about the format of this webinar, because it is a webinar. We'll be using the Zoom app, if you're not familiar with that, which means we'll be able to have up to 100 participants. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
But so what exactly is the kind of format that we're going to go with? Is there going to be time for questions? Are people going to get to read copy?
So, mainly in the webinar context, because it can be so many people, we won't be working, one-on-one with probably most of the people. But I definitely would like to sort of call out a couple of people in the audience to illustrate certain ideas from certain sections of text. And that will be, kind of later on. So basically it will start with a kind of overall discussion of text, then the discussion of subtext, and then examples of both, but really of subtext. And then I will ask for, a few volunteers to just kind of read, some things that I will have ready for them, and just work with how can you find more of the inner and deeper meaning. And then my favorite part will be the last, I'm hoping, half hour to do question and answer.
That's wonderful. I think, like you were saying before, there's just so much that can be gained, because we are talking about like not trying to box the listener in, because as the narrator, you know the ending, but you can't reveal that to the audience. You have to keep it it has to be like a journey of discovery for them.
Yes,
even though
exactly.
This is a topic that I'm personally very excited about. And I know that if you have any interest in audiobook narration, whether you're just getting started, or like you said, you've already got a few titles under your belt, but you might be trying to move away from, say, ACX to one of the larger publishers like Random House or Penguin or Blackstone or people like that. I think there's just so much to be gained. And like we were saying, just building up those really nuanced, layered performances for people to get that much more out of your narration.
That's exactly right. That's a really good way of putting it.
Well, thank you. So once again, we have the lovely Carol Monda, who's going to be teaching Subtext, the story beneath the words, on January 23rd at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time. And even if you can't attend live, there will be a recorded version of the webinar available once we've had a chance to upload it and edit out what have you. So don't worry if you can't make that date. You can still access this incredible webinar with an incredible coach. So Carol, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. I cannot wait for this webinar.
I can't either. And thank you for taking your time.
You're very
And
welcome.
all of you who are listening. Thank you.
So I'm Sean Daeley with the Global Voice Acting Academy and the lovely Carol Monda signing off. Thank you very much, guys.